This video, we're looking at public law. We want to take a look at this concept, this idea, and how it impacts society, and also how it's different from civil law. Oftentimes, people don't understand what public law is. They ask several questions about public law. How does that contrast with constitutional law, criminal law, and so forth, etc.? In this video, we're going to discuss this and have a good understanding of what public law is. And here it says public law governs the relationship. So please take note of this. The relationship between individuals on one hand, and individuals here are citizens, right? So let's put that here. So these are citizens of the country and the state, right? So we have two things happening here. One is individuals, the citizens, and the second, the state. So here we have, this is the state, citizens versus the state, right? So the relationship between the individuals and the state. Now, why is it important for us to have such a law in a society to define that relationship? How the citizens relate to the state and how the state will relate to the citizens. It's important for a number of reasons to keep law and order in place, to ensure that both citizens and the state know their responsibilities, to ensure that there is a process in place to address issues that may arise within the society, right? So all of these are very critical for us to have public law in place. Public law governs the relationship between individuals and the state and the structure operation of government. So now we add another layer to it. So it's looking at the relationship between the individuals and the state, and then the structural operation of government, and covers a lot of areas. And this is where it becomes so critical. And this is where sometimes it will differentiate between civil law and public law. So public law then covers areas like constitutional law. Every country has one, or most countries should have constitutional law. The constitution of the country, what it can do and what it can't do, the parameters of the state, the parameters of the citizens, the parameters of the organs of the state, the institutions, and so forth. Criminal law, right? Of course, criminal law, when crime is committed, it goes against the law of the land, the criminal law of the land. And administrative law as well. Please take note of this. Administrative law. And public law ensures fairness and defines governmental powers and responsibilities towards citizens. This is why public law is important. It defines the governmental powers and responsibilities towards citizens. So if the government is overstepping its boundaries, it's clear in the public law, and citizens can challenge that in the court of law, right? So everybody knows their boundaries. Everybody knows their responsibilities. Everybody knows their duties. The state knows, the citizens know, the institutions know, and everyone is within the limits of the public law. All right, so this is so critical. So let's take this again and make sure we have that fundamental understanding of what public law is. Public law governs the relationship between individuals and the state and the structure and operations of government. The structure and operations of government, right? So government has several structures. How is the structure of the government? How is the government structured? And how does that structure impact the citizens, right? So is it structured in the form of parliamentary system of government, or presidential system of government, a monarchy system of government, theocracy system of government, or democratic system of government? What is the structure of governance, right? Public law dictates that and defines that. So public law governs the relationship between individuals and the state and the structure and operation of government, covering areas such as constitutional law, take note of this, criminal law, and administrative law. It ensures fairness and defines governmental powers and responsibilities towards the citizens. But it also does something else. It is distinct from private law. And this is the key point here. It's distinct from private law, and private law is civil law, which handles dispute between private citizens. So the dispute is not between citizens and the state. The dispute is between families, between individuals, between a group of people, between communities. That is civil law. And civil law is not public law. Public law governs life in society as a whole. It looks at society from the global perspective, so to speak, and private law It's within individuals, within communities, within groups, parties, and so forth, etc. This is public law, and it's important to make this distinction so that there's no confusion. It governs the relationship between individuals and the state. This is very clear and tells us about the structure and operations of government. So it covers constitutional law, criminal law, and administrative law. Now, constitutional law is clear, right? The constitution of the country. Criminal law is clear. When you commit crime, there's a law or a series of laws you go against, obviously, and those laws will apply, and they have penalties specified. If you are guilty of theft, there are penalties for that. If you're guilty of assault, there are penalties for that within the criminal code. If you're guilty of breaking and entry, there are penalties for that as well, and penalties for the different crimes that are stated in the criminal code, right? So administrative law as well, right? So it's covers administrative law, and administrative law is a very important piece in the grand scheme of things. Now, many people will ask the question, what is administrative law? We understand constitutional law, we understand criminal law, but what is administrative law? And that's a good question. Administrative law governs how government agencies and tribunals and officials, how they operate. And it ensures that they act fairly, responsibly, transparently, and within the legal authority when making decisions that affect citizens. So administrative law deals with government agencies and bureaucracies and how they interact with the citizens and ensure that there's fairness in that process. So let's take a look at these areas a bit closely, the key areas of public law a bit closely. Here we say constitutional law, right? You already touched on this briefly, defines the framework of government, power distribution, and fundamental rights, right? That's constitutional law. Constitutional law defines the framework of government, the limit of government, the responsibilities of government, how far the government can go, what is legal, what is not legal, etc. The powers of government, how the powers are distributed, and fundamental rights of citizens. Let's put that here, right? Of citizens, right? The rights of citizens, very, very critical here. That's constitutional law. Constitutional law governs the rights of citizens, and citizens know their rights under the law. For example, rights, right to education, right to life, right to work, right to shelter, right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and so forth. Those things are enshrined in the Constitution, right? Power distribution is defined there as well. The framework of government and governance is defined there as well. The type of government we're going to have, the structure of governance we're going to have, and so forth. All of that is spelled out in the constitution of a country, constitutional law. For example, a government should last for 4 years, and after 4 years, there's going to be an election. That's stated in the constitution. So that's a very critical piece of public law. And then we have the criminal law that deals with offenses against society, for example, theft, assault, and their punishment prosecuted by the state, right? So the individual goes against the state, and the state prosecutes the individual and say, you have violated this law, and here is the evidence, and because you have violated this law, and we have evidence to convict you, you're guilty of this crime, and you've gone against this law, therefore your penalty is 5 years imprisonment. All of these are specified in the criminal law. And the administrative law, as we just noted moments ago, right, regulates government agencies, officials, and tribunals, ensuring that they act lawfully and fairly when interacting with the public, when dealing with immigration, for example, social services, for example, when dealing with several types of paperwork, for example, etc. All of those things are governed by administrative law. And of course, we have tax law, right? Governs how government collects taxes and how the people pay taxes, how the people support the government with their taxes, the level of taxation, for example, the categories of taxation, for example, the different areas of taxation, for example. All of those are covered under tax law. And the other aspect is procedural law, which is rules for legal processes, including how government bodies make decisions and how individuals can challenge them through judicial review. Very important. All of these are important aspects of public law. And this is why public law is very important today. Because if we don't have public law, we have anarchy. If we don't have public law, we don't have a society, and it's a free-for-all type situation, and you will not have unity or harmony in that society. So public law gives us order. Public law gives us a sense of safety and security. Public law ensures that every party in the society knows their role, and government cannot violate the rights of citizens that are entrenched in the Constitution of the country. Right to freedom of speech, right to education, right to life, right to work, right to own property, and so forth. All of those are enshrined in constitutions. Criminal law, right, we've just talked about it, administrative law, and tax law, and procedural law. This is public law, a very important aspect of our communities and of our societies and of our countries that govern how we live and operate and defines the relationship between the citizens and the government, governs how the citizens interact with the government and how the government interacts with the citizens or the state. Sometimes we say the government and sometimes say the state, the same thing, and how the state interacts with the citizens. Very, very important aspect of society. And without public law, there's anarchy. All right, so let's just wrap this up very quickly. Public law governs the relationship between individuals and the state and the structural operations of government, covering areas like constitutional, criminal, and administrative law, ensuring fairness and defining governmental powers and responsibilities towards citizens. It's distinct from private law, and that's a very important point here to note. It's not the same. Private law handles dispute between individuals, not dealing with government, not dealing with government agencies, not dealing with the state, just between individuals. Handles dispute between individuals and between private parties. Key areas of public law: constitutional law, right, defines the framework of government, power distribution and fundamental rights of citizens. Criminal law deals with the offenses against society: theft, for example, assault, for example, murder, for example, breaking and entry, for example. And these are punishable by the criminal code if one is to be found guilty. And this is prosecuted by the state. Administrative law, dealing with bureaucratic processes and government agencies. And tax law, dealing with taxes, as the term suggests. Tax laws, dealing with taxes, how the government taxes the citizens and how the citizens respond to the government policies regarding taxation, government laws regarding taxation, and defining the level and the scope of taxation. And procedural law, of course, rules for legal processes, including how government bodies make decisions and how individuals can challenge those decisions through what is called judicial review, which is typically handled by the courts. So this is public law. And understanding this is critical to understanding the governmental frameworks and understanding the concept and idea of law and order in society.